Have you ever felt completely alone, even when you're surrounded by thousands of people? It's a strange feeling, but sometimes the real terror isn't being alone. It's realizing you're the only one who's noticed that something in the crowd isn't human. Here at Nightmare at 3 a.m., we look for the wrong faces in the crowd. If that thought sent a chill down your spine, hit that like button so we know you're paying attention too. Subscribe so you don't get lost when the chaos begins. And the question I leave you with is, what's the scariest thing you've ever seen happen in public? My name is Maya. I'm 20 years old, and that was the first time I felt the power of a collective scream. We were in downtown Chicago, thousands of us, a sea of signs and united voices. Beside me, my best friend Ben seemed a little more nervous. "Stay close, okay?" he said, and I just nodded, my heart pounding in time with the drums someone was playing up ahead. The energy was electric, a mix of righteous anger and infectious hope. I felt part of something bigger, something important. In front of us, about 100 yards away, was the other wall, the wall of order, an impersonal line of police officers in riot gear, with black helmets and shields that reflected the afternoon sun. Looking at them, I felt real fear. The fear of batons and tear gas, but it was a fear I understood. It was as I scanned the line that I noticed him. There was something wrong with one of them. At first I couldn't put my finger on it, but he was different. He stood in the center of the formation, and he was perfectly, absolutely still. The other officers betrayed their humanity with small movements, an adjustment of their shields, a slight turn of their heads. Not this one. He was like an obsidian statue, and he seemed taller. "Ben, look at that officer in the middle," I whispered. "He's not moving." Ben narrowed his eyes. "Which one?" "It's their training, Maya. Intimidation." I tried to accept the explanation, but I couldn't take my eyes off him. There was a lifelessness to his posture that made me shiver. The tension finally broke. Someone in the crowd threw a brick. The projectile flew in a high arc and struck the helmet of the officer I was watching squarely. What happened next was what turned my discomfort into fear. There was no clue-sharp sound of a hard object hitting plastic. There was a thuddle, heavy and wet, as if the brick had hit a bag of wet sand, and the officer didn't react. No flinch. Nothing. "Did you see that?" I shouted to Ben, but my voice was drowned out by the noise that was now growing. He hadn't seen it. In the chaos, I was the only witness to this impossibility. A shout of command echoed and the wall began to advance. Panic was instantaneous and the crowd broke apart. I was pushed back, losing sight of Ben. As I was carried along by the tide of people, my eyes swept the scene, searching for the figure. And I saw him. He wasn't marching or running, he was gliding. His strides were long and fluid, with an uncanny efficiency. His helmet, a black sphere, seemed to always be turned toward me. He wasn't dispersing the crowd, he was hunting me. The sound of a dry explosion and a cloud of acrid smoke made me stumble. I was shoved hard to the side, falling into a narrow, stinking alley. The sound of the main street became a muffled roar. For a moment, the isolation was a relief. Then a shadow blocked the entrance to the alley. It was him, the officer. He began walking toward me, his footsteps eerily quiet on the dirty asphalt. I was trapped. "I didn't do anything," I managed to say, my voice shaking. He stopped about 2 feet away from me. In absolute silence, he raised both hands, slow and deliberate, and grasped the base of his helmet. With one smooth movement, he removed it. I held my breath, but there was no face beneath it. There was only nothing, a smooth, polished, impenetrable darkness, like the glass of one helmet looking into another helmet. It was a void in the shape of a head, an absence that stared back at me. The last thing I saw was that black-gloved hand coming toward my face, and then darkness. I don't know how I survived. I woke up hours later, sitting on the sidewalk miles away, with Ben shaking my shoulders, his face pale with worry. I had no injuries, just a pounding headache and a hole in my memory. I tried to explain what I had seen, but my words came out jumbled and disjointed. Ben thinks I had a panic attack. Maybe I hit my head in the confusion. The police took my statement with looks of pity and disbelief. To them, I was just another frightened student who had gotten lost in the middle of a violent protest. Officially, none of the things I described happened. But I know the truth. I know that whatever found me in that alley was not human. I try to live a normal life now, but something is broken inside me. The real problem is not the memories, it's the sound. Sometimes in the silence of my room, I hear it. Acklick, high-pitched and mechanical, followed by a low electric hum that lasts only a second. It's the sound that absence makes. And the worst part is when I look in the mirror. Most of the time, it's just me, Maya, with tired, scared eyes. But sometimes, for a split second, when the light hits it just right, my eyes reflect nothing. They become just two spheres of smooth, polished darkness. And in those moments, I hear the click deep inside my head. I wonder, what was it that looked back at me in that alley? And more importantly, how much of it did I bring with me? My name is Daniel. I am 42 years old, and for the past 15 years, I have been covering human discontent for a living. I have recorded the sound of wars, elections, and natural disasters. To me, a protest is a symphony of chaos, and my job is to capture its sonic truth. I am not an activist. I do not carry a sign. I carry a directional microphone and $1,000 headphones that allow me to hear the heart of the crowd, separating the individual scream from the collective roar. I am an observer, a collector of echoes. I thought this made me immune to the contagion of passion. I discovered the hard way that there are infections that enter not through the lungs, but through the ears. The Portland protest was like so many others, a mass of people, energy, anger, and hope. I was positioned, capturing the audio for a documentary, feeling the familiar professional detachment. Then the new chant began. It was subtle at first, a small section of the crowd testing out a new melody. It was simple, almost primal. 2 rising notes, 3 repeated words. We are one. The phrase was powerful. Within minutes, it had spread like wildfire, the entire crowd pulsing with those 3 words. Professionally, I was impressed. I adjusted the levels on my recorder to get a clean sound, and then through my Sennheisers, I heard it. Beneath the thousands of human voices, there was something else. A low-frequency hum, a deep, resonant note, perfectly in tune with the chant, but not human. My first reaction was technical, interference. With so many cell towers, police radios, and broadcast equipment, the air was tainted with signals. I checked my cables, changed the frequency of my wireless transmitter. The hum persisted. I began to rationalize. Maybe it was some strange acoustic phenomenon, the sound bouncing off the glass buildings. but it sounded too clean, too deliberate. The humming didn't go away. On the contrary, as more people joined in the chanting, it became clearer and purer in my headphones, as if it were feeding on the voices. It defied any logic of technical interference. I took my headphones off for a moment, and the only ambient sound was the chanting, loud and raw. I put them back on, and there it was, like a guttural bass in a profane song. That's when I looked at the faces in the crowd. The passion I'd seen before had been replaced by something else, a trance. Their eyes were glassy, their jaws slack, everyone swaying in perfect, unnatural synchrony. This wasn't the coming together of thousands of individuals, it was the movement of a single organism. I turned to Mark, my cameraman. Mark, look at their eyes. Something's wrong. He looked through his lens, then back at me. They look really focused to me, Dan. That's an amazing shot. Keep shooting. He couldn't hear what I was hearing. He didn't see the puppet, just the dance. And I realized I was alone, isolated by the same technology that gave me a deeper perception of reality. The tone of the chant began to change. We are one. The words were the same, but the intent behind them had become a growl. The unified energy had turned into a collective rage. Small acts of vandalism began, not randomly, but in concert. A line of protesters, moving as one, tore down a barricade. Another group smashed the windows of a store, their movements in perfect unison with the rhythm of the chant. It was a hive, and the buzzing was the voice of its queen. And that voice was starting to get to me. A dull headache began to throb behind my eyes in sync with the buzzing. I felt a vibration in the bones of my chest. I had to get out of there. My journalistic instinct was fighting my survival instinct. I kept recording, documenting the insanity, even as I felt the same insanity clawing at the walls of my own mind. Mark and I finally decided to retreat as the riot police began to advance. We ran down a side street, the sound of the crowd becoming a distant roar. The air felt clearer, calmer, but the chanting didn't stop. It continued in my head, an endless loop. The buzzing was now a throb inside my skull. A strange emotion, one I hadn't felt in years, began to bubble up in my chest. Pure, hot, electrifying rage. It felt horrible and yet good at the same time. I passed a dark window of a closed store and stopped, staring at my own reflection. My face was pale, my eyes wide, but behind my weary expression, I saw the same vacancy I'd seen in the crowd, the same readiness for violence. The virus was no longer out there. It had found a new host. I'm in my hotel room now. It's been hours. The city outside is quiet, but inside my head, the chant is a constant hum, and the buzzing is my new pulse. On my laptop screen is the audio file, the evidence, the weapon. The part of me that still remembers being Daniel the journalist is screaming at me to delete it all. This is poison, a sonic plague that cannot be released. But the other part, the new part that vibrates with the buzzing, has other plans. It remembers the feeling of power, the purity of that unified rage. It wants the whole world to hear this song. It wants everyone to become one. I've named the file The Sound of Unity. It's a good title. The story would be the biggest of my career. And as I stare at the send button on my email to the newsroom, a smile that doesn't quite feel like mine spreads across my face. I think the world is ready to hear it. My name is Sarah, and Liam's hand was sweaty and firm in mine. If things get ugly, if we get separated, he shouted over the sound of the crowd, we'll meet at the statue of the general in Northwood Park. No mistake. I nodded, my heart pounding more from adrenaline than fear. We were here for a cause, and the feeling of being part of that human wave was intoxicating. We were young, we were loud, and we were invincible. The air was alive with chance and tension as the line of police officers loomed in the distance. It was the kind of moment you knew you'd remember forever. I just didn't realize how hauntingly that memory would stick with me. The dispersal was sudden and violent, a hollow sound like a mortar shell, and clouds of tear gas blossomed in the middle of the street. The panic that followed was a force of nature. The human tide that had been propelling us forward now ebbed, breaking into a chaos of fleeing bodies. Liam's hand slipped from mine. "Liam!" I shouted, but my voice was drowned out by coughs and screams. I was shoved, I stumbled, and when I recovered, he was gone. My cell phone had lost signal. Cold panic gripped me. The plan, the rendezvous point. I turned and ran in the opposite direction of the crowd toward the apparent peace of Northwood Park. The transition was what struck me first. At one corner, the deafening roar of the protest. At the next, near silence, broken only by my own labored breathing and the distant echo of sirens. The silence was so abrupt that it felt unnatural, as if I had stepped through a glass wall into another world. I reached the entrance to the park, and my heart slowed a little. I spotted the statue in the center of a clearing, a forgotten Civil War general mounted on his bronze horse, both green with age, and I saw that I was not alone. There were about 20 people scattered around the base of the statue. Relief flooded through me. Others had the same idea. They were protesters like me, recognizable by their clothes, their backpacks. "Excuse me," I called, approaching. "Has anyone seen a tall guy in a green hoodie? His name is Liam?" No one turned around. No one answered. They were all standing still, some sitting on the grass, some leaning against the granite pedestal. But all were completely silent, and all were looking in the same direction, up at the statue. Logic told me they were just tired, in shock. But their silence was heavy, unanimous. It was wrong. Fear began to creep beneath my relief. I walked over to a girl with pink hair sitting cross-legged in the grass. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked, touching her shoulder. She didn't move. Her skin was cold despite the mild night. I leaned over and looked at her face. Her eyes were open, fixed on the statue, but they were cloudy, milky, like those of a dead fish. I recoiled with a muffled gasp. I looked at the others, an old man with a beard, a young man with a nose ring, all the same. Still, eyes wide and empty, all in silent worship of the bronze figure. They hadn't been waiting. They had been harvested. My blood ran cold. I began searching desperately for a green sweatshirt, praying I wouldn't find it. My gaze swept over the base of the statue, the pedestal, the blank faces. Nothing. A sigh of relief escaped me. Liam wasn't here. He'd managed to escape. I had to get out of here. I had to run. That's when I saw it. Behind the statue's massive pedestal, near the bronze horse's hind leg, was a strip of green cloth. My stomach turned. I turned slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs, and there he was, Liam. He was leaning against the statue, his head tilted back, staring into the general's face with the same milky, vacant eyes as everyone else. "Liam!" I shouted, running to him. I grabbed his shoulders and shook him hard. "Liam, let's go. Wake up." His skin was cold. His body was heavy and unresponsive. He was there, but he was gone. Tears of terror and despair streamed down my face. I released Liam, who slumped back against the bronze and looked up at the cause of it all, the mute general on his horse. "What have you done?" I screamed at the statue, my voice breaking on a sob. "What have you done to him?" In the silence of the park, a sound cut through the air. A low sound, a long, dragging creak of ancient metal protesting decades of stillness. Frozen in place, I watched the bronze statue's head move. Slowly, with terrible finality, it turned on its metal neck, and its painted eyes, which had stared out into the distance for a century, lowered and focused on me. I had arranged to meet Liam at the statue. What I didn't know was that the statue was waiting for us too.